This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It is Friday, September the 19th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams produced the Come On With It edition. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial and get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So in front of a sold-out crowd in Mary Brown Centre last night. Pretty furious energy in the building. Fantastic. The Newfoundland Regiment opened up against the defending Quebec Major Junior champions, Moncton Wildcats. 7-5 victory. They got scored on 42 seconds in. Next thing you know, the regiment responded for three quickies. They were up 4-1. All of a sudden it's 5-5. Power play goal with a few minutes to go. Maybe about 5 minutes to go in the third period. Then an empty netter. The regiment win. They're back on the ice tonight against, once again, the Moncton Wildcats. Another junior note. Local defenseman Matteo Rotondi. He's been named the captain of the Drummondville Voltigeurs. They won the league championship a couple of years ago. This is his fourth year with the team. And of course, he was also part of the Canadian team that won gold at the World Ball Hockey Championships this summer. Fantastic stuff. So Matteo Rotondi from Newfoundland and Labrador, the captain, and Drummondville Voltigeurs. And a quick one in the Women's World Cup of Rugby. Real barn burner on stage here this afternoon. Canada against New Zealand in the semi-final at the World Cup. We're definitely in with a shot. That's world's number one and number two. Match up 3:30, I think, local time this afternoon. And someone asked me why I'm not following the World Athletic Championships, considering I follow the swimming championships so closely. Fair enough. At the World Athletics Championships, we're doing pretty well. We're actually third in the medal standings. And we've got 3 gold. Swept the hammer throw, both men and women. Anyway, there you go. What's this? And also, this conversation gets left behind. And we know that Canada Post has struggled mightily. Cumulative losses of some $5 billion since 2018. And still no arrangement in between the postal workers, some 55,000 strong, and Canada Post itself. I hear people say, look, who cares, right? We've got so many options out there, all the couriers and all the rest of it. That's absolutely true. But if you ask people in parts of rural Canada that don't have access to a courier, this is still a big deal. And it's still a big deal to business. You know, even politicians are bemoaning the fact that there's no longer flyers that are unaddressed being sent out by Canada Post. So someone asked me why we're not talking about it anymore. It's a fair conversation to be had. But the future of Canada Post as a corporation is obviously in slings. $5 billion in losses since 2018, and it's only getting worse. The trend is downwards across the board. So someone wanted me to bring it up, maybe to provoke conversation. There you go. All right. This one kind of get lost a little bit too because the news cycle is so quick. And I like how Brian Medore is putting it in the newscast. Another day of election promises coming. This one is about the medical laboratory systems and the shortage therein. Look, we all know that blood work is the start of diagnosis, and to gauge whether or not your treatments are working, a variety of importance, obviously, to blood work being done in a timely fashion. So there once was 2 training programs at the College of the North Atlantic. They've gone by the wayside. There's only 1 program now out in Central, and not enough technicians coming out of that particular program anyway. I realise and I understand that post-secondary institutions absolutely require some autonomy. Of course they do. But you also have to factor in the gaps that we need filled, healthcare and otherwise, in this province. So when the government transfers some $86 million from the budget to College of North Atlantic, you know, there's provincial student grants that come from the province. There's also the nurses' bursary. Not to say we have to dictate to, but to have careful conversation with post-secondary institutions to ensure that the students that we need train in a variety of fields, whether it be nursing school, the medical school, and yes, medical laboratory assistants at College of North Atlantic. It's hard to understand how that went by the wayside when we see a day in modern-day Canada where there are 0 bloodwork appointments that could be honoured at the Health Sciences Centre. It's mind-boggling to me. How about you? All right, and in the realm of campaign promises, even though we were told by the Liberal government that there was no opportunity to back out the provincial portion of HST on home heating, well, lo and behold, there is. And of course there is. The Tories did it like, 2012? It's been asked for many times, especially by the NDP, and now the province says, and Premier Hogan says, that the provincial portion of HST on electricity will be removed, but only for residential customers. Obviously, the business community quite frosted with this particular announcement. A 10% savings for those of us who get electricity bills, it's a good thing. And, it's a wonder how things change so quickly. We can't do it, but here we're going to do it. And, of course, a campaign promise is exactly that. And we'll see how it gets followed through on. But, for political parties, it kind of feels a little bit petty, and this goes across the board for every party over years, is if you're asking for something and then all of a sudden the government of the day goes ahead and does it or promises it on the campaign trail, and then, hey, that was our idea. I would think for the most of us, voters, taxpayers, ratepayers, I don't really care whose idea it is anymore. I just want the good ones. I just want good ideas. I want them implemented. And I honestly couldn't care less what party brings them forward, because that's where we are today. The hyper-partisanship is really bogging us down. More on the federal front than provincially, I would suggest, but it's part of the conversation. So off comes the 10% off your electricity bill. Has to be done via legislation. And yes, there's some collaboration that has to be done with the federal government, a la what they did in New Brunswick to do the exact same thing. So apparently that's coming. Your thoughts on it? All right, so for the business community to not be able to take advantage of that 10% break, there's a difference between a small mom and pop company. Is there a way to address the small and medium-sized business with the potential to save on electricity? Because the big industrial customers, like the mines and what have you, I don't think we need to cut them any slack, because we've already negotiated an industrial price for electricity with them. And I think the same conversation we had with municipalities. The electricity bill in the bigger centres, it's a huge amount of money per year. So your thoughts on it? And then Tony Wakeham, leader of the PCs, yesterday talking about some tax breaks. So permanently reduce the provincial gas tax. So does that mean just to stay with the 8 cents that the province has cut off into the future, just to make that permanent? Because I don't think we're talking about removing the entirety of provincial tax on the government. And there's apparently a forecasted reinstatement at 8 cents next April on the 1st. What do you know, April 1st. So raise the basic income exemption to $15,000, which would be the highest in Atlantic Canada. Introduce a tax credit for rotational workers. I'd like to know a bit more about that. Not only the rationale, but by how much. Then the seniors benefit, an increase by 20%. They've been talking about that for quite a long time. Expand eligibility for the child benefit, which will benefit another 3,000 children, we're told. Provide tuition refunds for graduates who stay and work in the province. Still a bit more detail on that. And of course, we'll have an opportunity to speak with the leaders on this program through the course of the campaign. And this comment will be associated with all the parties and all the leaders talking about providing more to the people of the province. And everyone wants more. Of course they do. And everyone would like to have to pay less taxes. Of course. But what we've got to have factored in here is some sort of attention to how we pay for things. Look, I'm going to welcome a tax cut. I'm going to welcome a reduced electricity bill. But at the exact same time, I can also cover the fact that we do have to find ways to pay for things. Look, with the deficit at $626 million, which includes all of the big tobacco money, which we do not have yet, you got to factor that in. We're borrowing $4.1 billion this year. And into the future with things like rate mitigation at the Muskrat Falls site and all those things. Yes, the pledges and promises are attractive. They're alluring. But some sort of focus on how we get our fiscal house in order has got to be part of the conversation. I mean, we just barely spend more on education than we do to service our debt. People talk about what kind of world we leave for our children and our grandchildren. Well, I tell you what, if we don't start getting our house in order regarding the sovereign net debt, then we are leaving something untenable for our grandchildren. So I'd like to hear more from the politicians on that one. All right, I'll get a few quickies here because I'm anticipating a busy show. You talk about the focus that does need to be had on rural Newfoundland and Labrador from a variety of angles, and let's talk about it. But what we have not heard from any of the parties, including the government, is certain things like, for instance, inside the fishery. And I know a lot of the control remains on Kent Street in Ottawa, which is in some part ridiculous. But even things like the processing sector and what it means for the inshore harvester, given the fact that Royal Greenland did everything they could and pushed back by protesters on the wharf, Royal Greenland trying to buy the sea cucumbers at 50 cents versus the panel negotiated 69 cents. Then, of course, small processors said, hey, if they're getting away with it, I'm going to do it too. This might have a ripple effect into other species. Haven't heard anything from anybody on this. I mean, you talk about trying to capture some rural support. Things like that seem like the epitome of the low-hanging fruit to me, and I'd like to hear something from the government, because the government holds the license and has the ultimate authority here to ensure the processors are abiding by the parameters inside their license. So what about that? I'd also like to hear from political parties about some of the outstanding issues that have been identified by Denise Hanrahan, the Auditor General, and her team. So things like the health sector contracts. You know, we talk about travel nurses, but there's more to it than just travel nurses. Then it's the whopper that was the personal care homes. You know, the potential for abuse, physical, mental, sexual, the inappropriate administration of medication where someone was dead as a result of it. So there was a ton to that. Even just brief mentions of operational standards that need to be updated. Then public disclosure of noncompliance and tracking noncompliance measures so that people know that they've been rectified. So how about that? Then there was the examination of the medical care and dental health plans. Then, of course, there was the Memorial University's facilities management performance audit. So there's so much outstanding work that we talk about, but now all of a sudden, it's not a keen focus of any of the parties. Let's hear about it. You know, the glossy announcements of what you're going to add to benefit for the people of the province. How about trying to shore up some of the gaps that have been identified by people like Denise Hanrahan? And then even things like rate mitigation at Muskrat into the future. That pot of money that's been established right now, it's out in 2030. Then what? And Denise Hanrahan told me on this program she doesn't even have enough information about how it works to give any sort of informed commentary on it. So how about some of these items for those of you running? Also, I'd like to hear a little bit more about education. You know, whether we talk about the Accord and the 15 fictional citations, and hopefully that doesn't erode the credibility of the rest of the report, but let's get some education topics front and center on behalf of the political parties. Where are you? You know the problems. We talk about them all the time. So are we simply going to lean on the education 10-year roadmap? Fair enough. But if so, what in it is prioritized if you were indeed had the seat in the 8th floor of the Confederation Building? How about that? And inside education, again, someone told me, oh, you're going to be afraid to bring this up. So we know that there are some Catholic schools. There's a couple here in the city. There's a new one to be created out in Central. And Islamic homeschooling that's been going on in a non-permanent location, they're now looking for a permanent home. And the numbers of people of the Muslim faith, Islamic faith, are looking for a permanent location. They say they're going to use the public curriculum. And at this point, there's some 20 kids between grades 1 and 5. They're enrolled in full-time homeschooling. They also go on to say they're going to learn traditions of their faith. Whether it's real or not, some people absolutely do have questions about exactly what will be taught. Because if we're talking about, you know, acceptance and diversity and trying to avoid culture shock, which I understand, is people will have questions about exactly what's being taught. You know, I'm not so sure it's all of our absolute business to understand it, but it would be nice to know. I mean, if we're able to question and critique some of the teachings that will happen in the new school in Central, then I think it's fair that people have questions about exactly what's being taught, insofar as tolerance and being part of the fabric of the community and everything up and down the line. So, again, being told I'm afraid to talk about it, absolute nonsense. Okay. It's 11 months ago to the day where the Driftwood Inn out in Deer Lake burnt to the ground. You know, whether we talk about whether fire suppression services were working, the sprinklers and the alarm system and all the rest and the lighting, people who were staying at the inn that night said they weren't. And if it wasn't for one lady running around knocking on doors, the story might have been even more tragic. And remember, a 77-year-old tourist from America is dead. So 11 months, I know investigations like this are going to take some time. But surely we must know more now than we did then. Is there any update coming on that front? Because this is just not about the driftwood in. It's about the process for inspecting all of these commercial properties, hotels, motels, and otherwise. And I would suggest every public building about how the systems are working or if they're working. So 11 months to the day. There's got to be someone out there who can give us an update on behalf of the provincial government as to what exactly is going on with that investigation. 11 months seems fair to me. All right, we mentioned that an American tourist, 77-year-old man, dead as a result of that fire. Some of the numbers that are now out regarding travel and trade between this country and the United States, boy, oh boy. Let's start with the whole Buy Canadian. I'm going to put this back out because shame on the retailers who are bamboozling their customers on purpose, mislabeling stuff to say it's made in Canada or a product of Canada in the whole envelope of Buy Canadian. And we've identified at least 11 sites where they were purposefully misleading Canadian consumers. So the CFIA has the ability to levy fines on that front, but they didn't. So if you're not going to get fined, why would you stop? So some of the Buy Canadian numbers, apparently we're doing pretty well with domestic purchasing, but then you talk about travel. Boy, oh boy. According to Stats Canada, the number of Canadian residents coming back from the U.S. by car in August dropped 34% compared to the same month last year. Now, you go to the States if you want. It's not up to me. 1.3 million fewer people crossed into the country from its northern border in July compared to the month of 2024. Air Canada, Flair, Porter, WestJet have cut some U.S. routes altogether because demand is down. The trade numbers, apparently they're looking to sign some sort of tentative agreement with Mexico. The Prime Minister is in Mexico meeting with the Mexican President today, I guess yesterday and today. So we'll see. But some of those travel numbers, and we're told by the American President that he doesn't care, but I'm sure people working in hospitality probably care. And look, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it is wild. And this is not Canadian, but American politics gets into our psyche. It just does. It's not good, but it does. They're actually having out loud debates about whether or not they're going to afford protection to American citizens via the First Amendment like they did for the last 270 odd years. Whoa. I mean, the president said on Air Force One that the television networks are not allowed to criticize him. Is that not a red flag that people should be acknowledging, whether or not you supported his movement or not? It's remarkable to me. Things are unraveling down there as we see. Oh, and back to our country. So we thought we're going to see a budget in October. Apparently not. We're going to have to wait till November, the 4th of November, before the federal budget, generally tabled in the spring, finally gets unveiled on the 4th of November. All right, there's so much on the go. You know me. I'm up for talking about whatever's on your mind. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're going to kick it off speaking with the Executive Director of Trades and L. That's Bob Fiander. I think we have an update regarding Beta Nord. And then we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's begin this morning on line number 7. Saying good morning to the Executive Director at Trades and L. That's Bob Fiander. Good morning, Bob. You're on the air.
Morning, Patty. Thank you for having me on once again. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I got a little update here for the listeners, Patty. I was out at the Placentia Bay Industrial Showcase this last couple of days, and Equinor presented out there, and they also confirmed at the PBIS that there will be no construction, including topsides, happening in Canada. So that's pretty disappointing from my perspective and from many Newfoundlanders' perspectives, I expect. I'm not aware that there's any benefits agreement in place. As a result of this confirmation, I'm going to ask, will Jim, John, and Tony allow this mode of development to proceed, leaving Newfoundlanders and Labradorians behind? Because here's what's at stake, Patty, and we'll compare it a little bit to the Hebron project. Just based on dollar figures, Hebron cost around $14 billion. The jobs created in Newfoundland and Labrador, 67,500 jobs. Labor income, $2.8 billion in direct labor income, $1.6 billion in indirect, and $0.5 billion in induced. So the total labor income from that project, $4.9 billion. That's what's at stake here, Patty. The Beta Nord price tag is around $16 billion, so the jobs and labor income will be similarly massive if we construct it right here at home. But that is not Equinor's intention, as we have said before. The people of Newfoundland and Labrador deserve to know, as they go to the polls, which leaders are going to support keeping this work in the province.
Fair enough. I mean, because when we talk about royalties and expanding the tax base, that's all good. It's good for the provincial government coffers, but there's nothing quite like people getting a job. I mean, money in my pocket is better than money in the government's pocket.
We need to stay working. We need to keep our people safe. We need to keep them working. When they're working, they're spending money in the province. They're going home every night to their families, and things are good. But I don't hear any of that right now.
I understand your perspective. Of course I do, Bob. But let's just put this out there for the purpose of conversation. Is how do we square the financial circle when negotiating with a company the size of Equinor? I mean, they have said that they paused it right at the Energy NL conference, sucked every breath of air out of the room because they needed to financially restructure their model to eventually maybe get to production. So when we're talking money and their need to save their money, how do you approach it? Are you suggesting that the government go to the table and this is our position, if you don't abide by it, you can go away?
Well, one thing, Paddy, the resource is a 1 billion barrel plus reserve. Plus, I expect. But 1 billion barrel reserve is bigger than anything that we've seen in the province to this point. And if you go back in history and you start at Hibernia, the developers have argued all the way, each and every project, that they do not want to construct in Newfoundland and Labrador. But our governments of the day stepped in, took the hard position and said, you will construct here in Newfoundland and Labrador if this project is to proceed. And we are asking our leaders in the province right now to take that same position. And if there needs to be a gap made up, it needs to be taken out of the resource, because that's the resource that belongs to the people in Newfoundland and Labrador. I
wonder if this is where some potential federal government involvement would come to play. Because we know there was plenty of disappointment that Beta Nord was not included in the 5 major project list, nor was it included in the next wave of projects that we've seen coming from the PMO. Because, you know, people talk about maybe, just maybe, if the feds find a role to play with the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to have to be paid in royalties to the United Nations, because the country signed onto it. So that would make their business model more manageable, which maybe would allow for more focus on jobs and topside work here. So I guess all these things work hand in glove, which is why people are disappointed that Beta Nord was not considered by the Prime Minister. He said he supported it, but that's just talk.
For sure, and I don't think that's out yet. There's more nation-building projects to be announced, but if it's the intention of Equinor to build this over in Asia, then I'm not sure what the criteria and the definition under a nation-building project is, but my vision is we're going to put people to work in this country, not send work out to some other country.
Yeah, and, you know, I think last time we talked, Equinor and other major oil companies, their focus has been pretty clear about where they'd like to do a lot of this work, Texas or South Korea. And so it looks like one of those locations will indeed get the gig. We know that they've got a letting of the contract for the FPSO construction, but that does not mean it precludes them from doing some topsides work here. So that's an unfortunate update coming from you and I guess from Equinor over the last few days. Anything you'd like to add while we have you, Bob?
I'd just like to say to Jim, John, and Tony, we'd like to hear your position on this. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians would like to hear your position on this. It's a $16 billion project, and nobody is crowing about it during an election. There's something seriously wrong with that. That doesn't pass the sniff test.
We'll be happy to put this particular question to all three, because I can only naturally assume that we're going to get at least one opportunity to have all three leaders on. And this is absolutely part of the conversation. No question, Bob.
Much appreciated, Paddy, and we'll be back next week with some more.
Appreciate the update. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to line number 6. Heidi, you're on the air.
Hi. I'm just calling in regards to concerns I have about those dogs out in Harbour Grace. Is there any update on that at all, or
Nope.
who should we call?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, animal control is the authority of the municipality. I haven't heard anything from Harbour Grace, but I've seen the videos and I've seen the pictures. It's disgraceful. It truly is. So there used to be special deputies at organizations like the SPCA who could take this on themselves. So I assume there's animal control bylaws in Harbour Grace, and if they're not going to act on it, the province has to, because it's heartbreaking to see what's going on out there.
Yeah, I've heard. I was just talking to somebody this morning, and I don't even remember his name. I worked night shift, so I'm tired. But he said the provincial government and the RNC, the only people that can take the dogs out of there would be the RNC or RCMP, because of the laws had changed a few years back where the SPCA can't go in and do it anymore. It has to be the police. So And he said put pressure on the provincial government. That was his suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, it's both, I suppose, right? If it's going to be law enforcement intervention, then, of course, that would be in the control of the RCMP. We'll do some more follow-up. I tried earlier this week, just ran into nothing but roadblocks, but I'll give it another shot to see if we can't get an update, because that can't go on. I mean, remember a few years ago during one of the major snowstorms, there was visuals of a cow tied on to a shed down in Torbay, and we acted. And then we saw stories coming from different communities where dogs were being maltreated and emaciated. We acted. So why not now?
I don't understand why. And you can tell from the videos that it's clearly not acceptable. They can't lie down. There's flies, so obviously there's feces. And the people are doing this for like the last 13 years. Like, I just can't even. I can't even. It makes me so mad.
Me too.
Mad.
Yeah, I was really frustrated looking at it the other day. And, I guess Heather called on it earlier this week, and we've had your call today. That's going to spur me on to try to get some sort of update on whether action is going to be taken or not, because this can't go on. And, in addition to that, why would anybody want to have a pet, and in this case a dog, if they plan on treating them like that? It's just...
And there's multiple. And they're probably breeding them.
Probably. And beware of that breeder.
Well, it's unfortunate because the breed is getting a bad rep, all because of the owners. It's never the dog. It's always the owners, 90% of the time, unless they got like a brain tumor or something. And it's just not acceptable, really not. And it's sad because if I almost want to get a bunch of people to go in and just take the dogs. What are they going to charge us all with trespassing? Anyway, I don't understand. Good people want something done about it, but if we don't speak up and say something, that's when evil keeps happening. And I'm really glad I called.
And I'm glad you did too. We'll chase this a little bit here this morning, see if we can't get an update. I appreciate your time, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on here.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Like when we talk about people's pets, it gets very quickly emotional, right? For the obvious reasons. And those visuals of what's going on with those animals in Harbour Grace is disgraceful. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're speaking with you. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Say good morning to one of the candidates running for an at-large councillor position here in St. John's. Is Nikita Ryle. Nikita, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on here this morning.
No problem.
So I'm calling in because I'm deeply concerned about safety and our seniors. Through my campaigning, I've been talking to a lot of seniors, and they're stressing that they no longer are feeling safe to be outside walking alone. They no longer do things that they once enjoyed, like walking on our walking trails.
I hear the stories, we see them covered in the media, and it is so deeply unfortunate, whether it be with verbally being assaulted, physically assaulted. There's been stories of sexual assault, so obviously that would get into people's brains, and they say, well, I'm not going to take chances, go for my evening walk. So we know what's happening. What do we do about it, Nikita?
Well, from what I've been hearing, obviously we'd have to consult with the people as well, because, if we were working for the city, you're working for the people. So what I've been hearing is, I know that the city had considered ramping up security, but I don't think it should even be a consideration. I think it's a must. Our seniors help build this city, and if they don't feel safe doing things that they enjoy and that's good for their health, such as walking on walking trails, then we're doing something wrong here, aren't we?
I agree 100%. And there was just a big, massive security contract given out to people to monitor the National War Memorial downtown. So, which is more important? And that's obviously important to keep that from being defaced. But, what sounds so unfortunate to me is sometimes when we hear these stories, the first suggestion that we hear from folks is, well, walk in pairs or carry a stick or carry mace or pepper spray or something. That's just saying, okay, folks, take your chances and hope that you're not overpowered by someone on the trails. Please walk in pairs or please bring pepper spray, as opposed to let's make the trail safe.
Exactly. Since when did our city become a city where people didn't feel safe to walk alone? Times have definitely changed, and there needs to be something done about that.
Yeah, when you add up the extensive trail network here and in other communities, I don't know how you pragmatically police it, whether it be through private security or otherwise. But if, for instance, you had private security, and you wouldn't be able to do it on foot, but if you had private security or whomever, for instance, on bicycle, and you had one start at one end of the trail with one start at the other end, and you just keep taking your bike back and forth, identify any potential problem, and call the police if required.
Exactly. Other cities are doing just that, Paddy, and it is working, and I think that's something that St. John's needs to look at as a model, because if we're promoting people to be using these trailways, then we need to ensure that they're going to be safe for them to use.
Yeah, it's certainly public safety. Even if you just look at the Department of Justice provincially, their most recent survey said people don't feel as safe as they once did. Now, I guess media might play a role in that, because if it bleeds, it leads, and every bit of crime is covered extensively. Well, not every bit, but a lot of the big crimes are covered. So maybe, just maybe, we've also convinced ourselves that it's less safe than it actually is. People who follow along in the world of jurisprudence, they say that the vast majority of serious crime in this province is committed amongst the criminal element. They're hurting and killing each other, as opposed to random acts of violence. But we can't ignore the fact that these stories have been told, and they're becoming far too frequent. So I know where you're coming from. I'm a little worried when I hear people that I know who are, continuing to do the things they love to do, which puts them in potential harm's way, whether it be with discarded needles or dogs off a leash, and or some nuisance who's willing to hurt you when you're out for a walk.
Exactly, yeah. Our city is starting to change, not for the better, but for the worse. And our seniors need a voice too, and I feel like we need to start acting on people's concerns.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting it out there. And again, I know why people suggest ways to keep yourself safe, but that's a bit of a different conversation than how do we make it a safe environment to begin with. And I appreciate making time. Anything else you want to mention this morning, Nikita, while we have you?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me on, Patty. Have a great day.
Same to you. Bye-bye. Nikita Ryle, running at large here in town. Let's go to line number 2. Meg, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you, Paddy?
Okay, how about you?
Not too bad. I wanted to discuss, I'm a person with disability, and I am required, the people who support me, they pay for my taxis. And a PO was sent to the taxi company, and they send me a taxi to go to my medical appointments and such. And I've had some kind of disturbing encounters with some foreign drivers. And it was, I brought them to the taxi company's attention and asked for a local driver. There was a communication barrier. There was, costing me for extra money above and beyond what the PO would offer, costing me for tips. Over listening on conversations that I would have in the back with my husband, asking me if I would like to get back at my husband. Just off the wall, really inappropriate things happening. It's slamming on brakes when I'm getting out of the car. Like I said, I have a disability, and I've had many, many surgeries on my spine, and a reckless driving, and when I call to ask for a local driver, Patty, I got no problem with people wanting a piece of the pie and living in a trying to make a good life for themselves. I have no problem with that. But when I feel unsafe in a vehicle or with a person, then that becomes a problem for me. And I've called up the taxi company and asked for a local driver, and they have accommodated up until yesterday. A taxi was sent to my medical appointment to pick me up. It was a foreign driver, and the driver bypassed me and picked up an elderly woman, and it was my PO that they were using. And I called the taxi company to tell them. And he said, "You're already in the car." I said, "I am most definitely not in the car." So it was just as I came by, another a taxi had come, and it was a local driver, and he was letting an elderly woman out. And I said, "Can you help me? Can you straighten it up? Get the PO from your office or whatever, but this is what happened." And he was appalled, and he said, "Get in," because he knew I was in a bit of distress. I was very full of anxiety, and I'm dealing with that all day long with my disability of the last of late years. And so these things accumulated, it just makes me feel very unsafe when I'm going back and forth to these medical appointments, and 90% of them are in the daytime. There's no evening appointments or anything like that. This is all daytime. And I asked for a local driver, and I was yelled at yesterday by the dispatcher and said we're not allowed to send you a local driver. Well, I feel that's very unfair, Paddy, because if I feel unsafe in a situation, which I have on multitude of occasions, then something should be done about it.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry anything like this is happening to you or anybody else. So what did you say? The driver said, do you want to get back at your husband? Is that what you said?
Well, I was in the taxi. I was going to a medical appointment. And my husband and I, he wasn't with me, but he called me on the cell phone. And he always asked me, how are things going? Are you okay? Things like that. And I was we were discussing something else. And I hung up abruptly on my husband, and the taxi driver turned around and said, are you, in a heated discussion, are you looking to get back at your husband? And I looked at him, and I thought to myself, what are you talking about?
What does that even mean?
What does that even mean is right? And I said to him, and then he was like, oh, you pay more than what the PO was offering. And I'm like, I can't deal with this. And I don't want to deal with it, Paddy. I do not want to deal with it. I want to get to point A from point B in a safe manner. And I don't want to be accosted. I don't want to be, come on to or anything like that. I mean, it's despicable. And if I ask for a local driver, I should get a local driver. For me to feel safe, my husband taxied for years. And, never would he ever approach a passenger in that manner.
Nobody should. I mean, you're providing a service, not trying to make people uncomfortable in the back of the cab, regardless of who it is, where they're from, or anything else.
The driving Paddy alone. I mean, he was speeding going down. I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it home. I'm not going to make it home in the car. Going past through stop signs, coming up the street, he was going and then when he got to my place, of course, jammed on the brakes. I thought my head was going to go through the front seat, to the back seat, sorry. And, it was just really, I mean, if it happened once, you can say, you're going to get bad apples everywhere, right? But, when it happens a multitude of times, then you kind of have to say, listen, this is something I need to do for myself. What can I do? How can I do? So I've talked to the people who provide me my PO and provide me my taxis, and they will look into the matter. And I've called a taxi company, and they don't care. They don't look, as long as the money is being paid to them, they do not care.
Are you going to use a different cab company?
Well, I simply want a local driver because, foreign people are in every cab company. So I believe the issue is, number one, lack of communication and the language barrier. I find those two very, very huge, massive things that are bringing these things to light. They don't know the proper etiquette when you're driving a passenger. These are the things you don't say to people. Like, it should be common sense, right? But it is not.
For me, Meg, when I get in a cab, unless I provoke conversation, I want quiet, to be honest with you. I don't need to have a conversation with anybody. If I say I need to go to 112 Elizabeth Avenue, just drive me to 112 Elizabeth Avenue. That's it. I don't need to have a conversation.
To my husband on the phone. And after I hung up the phone, he interjected himself.
Yeah, I don't even know what that's about. That's just bizarre, regardless of who's offering it. Meg, anything else you'd like to tell me? First, can you send me an email with the name of that cab company?
I will.
Do that, please.
I guarantee you I will.
Okay, thank you.
Paddy, thank you very much, Paddy.
Take good care.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Let's get a break and don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the independent candidate running out Mount Pearl Southlands. That's Paul Lane. And good morning, Paul. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Paddy, before I get to my subject, I was listening to I think it was Mr. Finder with Trades NL. And, obviously as an independent member, I'm not going to be forming the government. However, I would just say, for the record, Beta Nord without any construction work here in Newfoundland and Labrador is a non-starter from my point of view. So I'll just put that out there on the record publicly. Paddy, I wanted to talk about, I guess, and this is something that you and I have talked about many a time, and that is our year-over-year deficits and our crippling provincial debt. And this morning I just want to tie it into, I guess, all of the campaign promises that I'm hearing from all sides. And in terms of campaign promises, I understand, the point of view certainly of either of the opposition parties making promises of things they're going to do different and things they would do because they're not in government and they didn't have the opportunity to do them. But I will say that for me, it does ring a bit hollow and disingenuous when you hear the government making all these announcements, giving the fact that they had 4 years to do all these things. And, well, quite frankly, this Liberal administration have had 10 years to do all these things. So, when a few months ago the NDP puts in a motion there on the HST on electricity or whatever, and the Liberals voted down, now all of a sudden they're going to make a campaign promise that they're going to cut the HST. And when you see them making announcements for all these other things that they couldn't do for the last 4 years or wouldn't do for the last 4 years, again, it rings pretty hollow to me. But anyway, with that said, we do have a crippling deficit. A crippling debt, I should say, year-over-year deficits. I believe we're borrowing $4 million, I believe it is this year, and that's even with I want to call it a fake budget, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the revenue numbers that were projected, counting money for that smoking lawsuit and so on that we're only going to get over like 30 years type of thing. But even with that, we're borrowing $4 billion. Our net debt is over $20 billion, and I would suggest our actual debt, when you factor in all the other unfunded liabilities and so on, it's much, much higher, probably $30 to $40 billion. So we do have a huge problem with our debt, with our year-over-year deficits. Nobody seems to want to talk about it. I don't necessarily hear the premier or or either the leaders talking about it. It's very easy during election time to promise, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to cut taxes, I'm going to spend more on this, spend more on that. And I'm not suggesting that there's not needs that exist, because we both know that there are lots of needs in this province that do exist. But at the end of the day, we are in, our books are a mess when it comes to the finances in this province. And at some point in time, somebody has to get serious about what are some of the things that we can do, to start addressing the debt. And certainly, if we ever do get a deal on the Upper Churchill, and I'm not sold on this deal as is, certainly not without an independent review as was recommended by Justice LeBlanc. But if we were to get a deal on the Churchill River, on the Upper Churchill, then I firmly believe that a good portion of that money needs to be focused on paying down the debt as opposed to spending every cent we got like drunken sailors, which is our history.
Yeah, I think the priority, let's just, the hypothetical of this happens and some contract gets signed. For starters, in 2030, we run out of any plan to control rates because of Muskrat Falls. So, for me, we've got to put money there first, then deficit next, then debt third. Because if that's not the three priorities, if any of that money ends up in government coffers and it's not spent on those exact three items, then we've made some mistakes. Now, if things pop up where there's some dire need based on who knows what, yeah, sure. But for starters, we've got to stop putting money in the future fund. It doesn't make any sense at this moment in time. But those three things, Muskrat rates, deficit, and debt, whatever order people want to put them in, that's where the money has to go. It's as simple as that. People talk about the Upper Churchill MOU and what are we going to leave for our grandchildren? Well, if we leave them $20 billion in net debt and it only grows year over year, I think that's the worst part about what we leave our grandchildren. Not what people might think is a bad deal at the Upper Churchill.
100%. I totally agree, and I understand that when we're in election mode and we're talking about the politics of it all, everybody loves to hear, oh, we're going to cut taxes on this, cut taxes on that, we're going to build new fancy facilities, we're going to hire more people for this, more for that. I think we all understand the politics around it, but at some point in time, our leaders have to show leadership and get away from some of this superficial nonsense and partisan nonsense and start dealing with the year-over-year deficits and the crippling debt. And you mentioned future funds, and you're right. Like I think the concept of the future fund was a good one, taking a portion of our revenue from our natural resources and putting it away. But to my mind, it should have been put on paying debt, because quite frankly, what we're doing, and I think a good analogy, I've heard this before, I think it was by a former premier at one time, who said this concept of the future fund was basically until we're to a point that we have a balanced book. So it's different if we had a balanced budget and we had additional money, yes, put some aside. But right now, as we are currently borrowing, when we put money for a future fund, it's akin to basically saying, I get paid this week, I pay my bills, the last bit of money I got left, I'm going to put in my sock drawer for savings, and then I'm going to go out and buy my groceries on my credit card. That's kind of what we're doing with the future fund. So, the idea of putting money aside is good, but let's start paying down that crippling debt, because, as you say, our children and our grandchildren are going to depend on that.
I understand the LeBlanc recommendations of no capital project with a price tag in excess of $50 million needs additional scrutiny or independent oversight. But what I cannot get is anybody who's calling for it to tell me what we're going to ask. And let's just pick a company, Goldman Sachs. Here they come. They're going to provide independent overview and whatever to the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding. We still have to ask them to ask a certain question. We still need a terms of reference what that looks like. And I don't know what that is. I'm not poo-pooing the concept of independent oversight, because LeBlanc is right, but we still have to have something for them to examine and ask them, okay, this, that, or the other thing. So if there's not a terms of reference, then it's an exercise in futility. So what are we asking? And if we're asking, is this the best deal? That's not really a question that they can answer.
No, well, I think we need to address the issues. For example, like Mr. Wilson before he left that committee, as an example, and that was very disturbing in itself. But he had pointed out, I think what I read is that there was a number of risks and concerns and stuff that he had, and that was never published. The public was never made aware of what those risks, what those challenges were. And then there's the whole issue of value, and whether or not, it's fine to have an escalator clause to say, and again, I'll just use a very simplistic example. It's fine to say, okay, a bottle of water is worth $1 today, and over the course of time, that bottle of water, just based on inflation and so on, in 10 years' time, that bottle of water might be $1.50. In 20 years, it might be $2. But what about if all of a sudden, due to climate change and everything else, water came in such demand that now that dollar bottle of water is worth $5 a bottle? So now we're talking value versus just simple, inflationary adjustments and so on. Who's going to get the value of that? Are we? I'm not so sure that we are, based on what I'm seeing. So, it's things like that. You're right. There has to be specific questions asked. I'm not the expert. I'm the first one to say that can necessarily develop all that terms of reference. But I think there are a lot of smart people in this province. We've heard from some of them on your show. I've listened to a number of them. Very intelligent, knowledgeable people that have many questions, many concerns about the current deal. And so those things and that terms of reference, as you say, has to be drawn up. And then we need someone totally independent. When I say independent from government, independent from Hydro, independent from any of the consultants that are working from Hydro, to have a look over that and to determine whether or not we're going to get a good deal.
Sure. And, and that's another tricky piece of business, isn't it? Is to find someone with a reputation and the experience to conduct this exercise that does not have any involvement with this province, the government in Quebec, Hydro-Quebec, or any of their subsidiaries, Newfoundland Labrador Hydro or Newfoundland Power, because, the tentacles of these big players reach a long way across the country, a long way across the southern border. So it'd be even tricky to find that. Look, last comment from me, and I'll give you the floor because I got to get going.
Sure.
The whole price elasticity and value and whatnot, I understand the concerns people are bringing forward, and we're happy to have those conversations here on the show. The price for electricity, still the final formula, hasn't even been negotiated. It's not even a final formula in the MOU. But they talk about being reflective of the wholesale electricity market value in Quebec, replacement costs in Quebec, wholesale electricity market value in Northeast export markets, which all have a floating target based on the change of value and price and cost. So, again, I am not rejecting this independent oversight conversation because I think LeBlanc is 100% right. I just need to know exactly what we're asking someone to evaluate. Paul, very quickly, I'll give you the final thoughts because I do have to go.
Yeah, no problem, Paddy. Always a pleasure to speak with you. But I guess another piece on it as well is, all this power that Quebec, for example, is going to get, even though we're getting a lot, we would get a lot more than what we're getting now because we're getting pittance right now.
Right.
Even though we would get a lot more. At the end of the day, though, they're still getting power for, I think it's 5.9 or 6 cents. And they would probably have to pay double that or more to get it from another alternative. So, it seems to me that they're still getting a bargain basement price. And plus, they are basically getting pretty much the lion's share of all that power to develop industry in their province. And my question is, why can't we be doing this industry here in Newfoundland and Labrador? We've got the power. Let's bring some smelters or whatever in here. That's another question. So there's many aspects to this.
Appreciate the time, Paul. I'm late for the news. Thank you.
No worries. All the best.
All right, same to you. Bye-bye. News time. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to Bianca Lono, running to be the Deputy Mayor of the City of St. John's. That's line 3. Bianca, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Happy Friday. How are you?
Happy Friday to you. Dave, is that a bad one? Yeah, let's put that one on hold. Try something else. Let's go where? Line number 2. Tolson Rendell, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Best kind. How about you?
Not too bad, thanks, Patty. I'm just giving you a shout regarding, as you know, the 2 elections on the go, basically covering each other, the provincial and the municipal. Well, I had a chance, Patty. I had a relation of mine, a first cousin of mine, died down in Hillgrade the week, and I was down to the funeral yesterday. So I went down to a place called Hearing Neck. Are you familiar with Hearing Neck?
No.
I have a relative down there, and first cousin of mine I stay with down there. Paddy, I had to say, well, first of all, before I get too far into that, I just want to congratulate all the candidates after coming forward in both elections, both the municipal and the provincial, and put their hands or their selves forward to be a part of this election. Because as you told me before, Paddy, and even when I ran myself for the NDP back in 2014, you said it takes a brave person or a person with a good sense and quantity to offer themselves for elective office.
I don't know what the numbers are around the province, but certainly here in the city, and I hear from an awful lot of candidates here in the city, huge numbers of people running for different wards and at large and deputy mayor, and there's a challenge for the mayor's seat, so it seems to be pretty healthy here. I know other communities, I've heard from some smaller communities saying that once again a low turnout for candidates running, but it can be a pretty thankless job, and for many communities it's a volunteer position, so it's no wonder why some communities have a hard time getting a big boatload of candidates to run, but it seems to be pretty healthy this go around. I suppose it's worth a check-in with MNL to see exactly what the numbers do look like across the province.
Yeah, well, there was a lot before that MNL, and I give them credit for putting it what they did. They had a lot of advertisement on both TV and radio, encouraging people to get involved. I don't know if you heard it or not, but I certainly did. Yeah, I mean, MNL's run that campaign successfully, I would suggest, the last couple of go-rounds, municipal elections, because it's a taller and taller task. Public service and the want to be serving the public is waning somewhat, seems to me anyway. Well, I'm putting myself in for election again, Paddy, in the town of Hearts Content, and I've been involved here with the town since I ran back in the 90s. I never got elected in a by-election. I ran again in 2001, and I've been elected here, and I've been elected ever since. But I had to say that most election I've seen other than this one was one in 2009. I think it was 9. We had 17 candidates, and this one right here in Hearts Content, now we got 15. Yeah. Hopefully it's healthy, because I mean, you remember last municipal elections 4 years ago, there were plenty of communities didn't even have enough candidates to fill all the chairs in council chambers. Yeah, and most you've heard over the province and around Labrador and Newfoundland, that you've heard a lot of talk about what is all the pensioners and this one and that one, where people are just retired. But here in this town now, we've got 2 or 3 real young candidates stepped up, which I appreciate that. And in fact, in the last election, we had a young candidate stepped up, and he's gone on now to be our our representative in the provincial election for Carbonear Trinity Bay of Erd, and his name is Riley Balsam.
Yeah, that's, a relatively normal pathway. People run for council, and then they run for provincial politics, maybe even eventually federal politics. Some people start right at the top, which is, I think, also interesting, but bold, and maybe even brave. Tolson, anything else while we have you this morning?
Yes, I do want to go back to, as I said, about Herring Neck and down that way, and infrastructure all over the province, Paddy. But down in Herring Neck, there's something hits my heart about Herring Neck. It's where the Sir William Coker started the first Fishermen's Union. And the road to Herring Neck, I have to say, is deplorable. It's. I can't remember, and I've been visiting Herring Neck since I was a teenager. I can't remember that road ever paved down there, and there's washouts down there now. And I mean, Sir William Coker founded the Fishermen's Union down there. I might be wrong. I thought it was I don't know, Petty, exactly. I'd say it was in October of 1901. Now, probably it wasn't. 1908. I'm sorry. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I say Sir William Coker founded the Fishermen's Union in Herring Neck, and I mean there's a lot of people, a lot of tourists travel them roads down there in the summer and the fall. That road down there is certainly deplorable. I walked the roads yesterday down there, and there's washouts and everything. I think the government, or whichever government get elected or is in there right now, which is the Liberals, they should have a look at that. I think Derek Bennett's the Liberal member down there. I mean, that road is deplorable. And I watched the school bus come down over the roads there yesterday morning. It's deplorable for a road to be in such conditions as, where you get youngsters traveling over on school buses. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, roads always be part of the conversation. And I'll throw this out there regarding the condition of the roads. Does anybody, regardless of what party you support, does anybody think that one party or another has a better plan for the roads? You know what I mean? We'll see the same old conversation all the time. Is a party gets in and then the opposition will accuse them of favouring their own voting district with a bit of pavement, and some of that might even actually be true. But I don't think I've heard any real change, of course, about how people different parties think they're going to approach road work.
Now, I haven't said that, Paddy. There's a nice bit of road work being done down there.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that road has to be looked at because that road is in deplorable condition.
Fair enough. I haven't been on that road.
It is patched up in places, I'll admit, but I tell you, I looked at it yesterday, and it's being undermined on the sides of the roads, and there's holes there foot deep in places I seen yesterday. Just an issue down there, and I've seen it. I know we've had it in our areas too, but I'm just saying that, and there's no doubt all over the province.
No doubt. I mean, Newfoundland Drive, if you were looking at it from space, it looked like a patchwork quilt.
Well, already, Paddy. Thanks for your time,
Tolson.
and have a good weekend.
You
Stay
too, buddy.
safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, pretty much nudged up against the break time, so let's check in on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Just got one from a lady saying she lives in city centre, and over the last couple of days, the dumpster at the old Muse Centre has been full of kids' sports equipment. So is the city throwing away kids' sports equipment? Because there's lots of children out there who could make use of it. She's reporting hockey nets and goalie gear, sticks. Really? So we'll find out from the city why, if it is indeed the city throwing out kids' sports gear, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's go ahead and take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number one. Hopefully a clear line. Say good morning to Bianca Lono, running for Deputy Mayor in the City of St. John's. Bianca, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Happy Friday. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. I don't want to take up too much time this morning because I'm actually up for just a hope. But what I wanted to do is do a bit of a plug in terms of revamping our city so that our city council moving forward has a modern fit for purpose legal framework. So what I really wanted to talk about was the City of St. John's Act, as it is decades old and it's riddled with outdated powers and limitations. And so I'd like to do a call out this morning to any provincial parties that are listening, if they're willing to commit together to overhaul it so that we can, as a council, they can effectively and transparently and responsibly have a 21st century City of St. John's. Give me some examples of what you're talking about. Okay, so there's kind of two different aspects of this. So there's the prescriptive act, which is a municipal act that sets out in detail exactly what a city can and can't do. So if it's not written in the act, the city has no authority. So, for example, it limits our flexibility. So if municipalities are kind of forced to go back to the province with amendments or special permissions if we're not able to. So, for example, I'm going to talk with Airbnbs or enforcing properties that are either derelict or vacant. And then the other side of it is the Enabling Act, which grants municipalities like a broader authority to govern local affairs that are subject to provincial oversight. So instead of having, you might make bylaws that matter on local concerns, but unless they could be specifically prohibited. So that the implication to that really, it gives municipalities flexibility and more autonomy to respond quickly to emerging issues without running back to the province of legislation each time. And I think it was Jeff that called in yesterday, and you guys were talking about that in terms of policing and just enforcing a lot of the bylaws exist, but we can't actually do the work and to enforce them because the City of St. John's Act has kind of some handcuffs on us, on the city to enforce some of those bylaws.
I mean, a lot of the Act is really quite old, and unlike the vast majority of the rest of the province who operate under a separate piece of legislation, it is different here in the City of St. John's. But what restrictions specifically are you talking about? Because it does grant pretty wide latitude for the creation of bylaws and the enforcement of bylaws here, which would deal with things like, derelict properties and Airbnbs and those types of things. So can you dig down just a little bit deeper so I know where you're coming from?
Absolutely. So I'm going to use fiscal and administrative constraints as an example. Currently, the legislative framework constrains how St. John's raises revenue and funds for new service demands. So our tax base is really narrow, and we rely on the property taxes in order to fund different services across the city. So, and those fixed costs are obviously rising, as we know, although hopefully we'll get an HST break on our electricity. So the expectations from our citizens on services and infrastructure, they're continually growing, but without changes, the city is kind of overburdened and underfunded, and I'd hate to see our property taxes go up in order to mitigate that. The other thing as well is transparency and accountability for citizen engagement. So the law from 1990, it doesn't presume the levels of public engagement, open data, or performance reporting. So like digital service delivery, for example, that our citizens expect in this day and age. So the updated Act could embed stronger rules around council accountability, financial disclosure, public input, and making government more open.
Yeah. So what was your comment about taxation? And property tax is one of the most regressive ways to tax a population anyway. And other than that, there's really only development fees and water fees and those types of things. So they're kind of hamstrung on revenue streams to begin with. So what was your thought on taxation?
So in terms of our tax base is normal, it's funny because I'm not going to steal this idea from our friend Mr. Breen, but if say for example if there was an HST overage, being able to have that money go back into the municipality, because that would give us a little bit more wiggle room in terms of spending, because everything comes from the property taxes in terms for municipal dollars that come into the city. So that would give us a little bit of extra wiggle room as well. And just overall, in terms of the powers that are granted and written with the old legal language, it's outdated limitations. So, for example, and I was saying before, if a property has been left to be abandoned or if it's derelict, the city can give a notice and they can ask to and ask them to fix up their property or maintain their property. But in order to enforce it, they have to go through the courts. So that's taking up more resources.
Yeah, for starters, and this is not necessarily handcuffs because of the St. John's Act, but it would be nice as a taxpayer here in the city of St. John's if the provincial government paid tax on their properties.
Imagine that. There's an awful lot of them because we have over 2,000 not-for-profits that are owned by Newfoundland Labrador and President Corp in the city of St. John's.
Yep. Anything else while we have you, Bianca?
No, I got a jet because I have to go back and fill some hampers. But thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'm sure I'll talk to you next week.
Same to you. Thank you, Bianca. Good luck.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bianca Lona, running for Deputy Mayor. Let's go to line number 6. Paul, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty. How are you today?
Okay. How about you?
Not too bad, buddy. Not too bad. I just found out. I wasn't going to call you, but I said I better. The lady that called you about the taxi record, as you know, I'm a local taxi driver here.
Yep.
I understand where she's coming from. I understand the frustration. We hear it every day. I think the big part of the miscommunication is lack of training for the drivers, and not only that. Ever since what am I thinking here? The Liberal government back in April of 2024, they waived the written test and the road test to get a taxi license. The reason they did it is so they could introduce Uber to the city. without having to go through all the red tape.
Yeah, I understand your Uber concerns here, but when we're talking about how one taxi driver or another, man or woman from wherever, how they deal with the general public. So when I get hired to work at a cab company, I mean, are there codes of conduct that I have to abide by and I sign that particular contract as a term of my employment, or what are you told and how to deal with the general public? And is there any repercussions if you are, found to be abusive or insulting or rude or whatever the case may be?
Well, I guess I know the lady personally. She's a great person. I've drove her many a times. Very easygoing and like a great customer to have, a great repeat customer to have actually. And most of our customers are repeat customers and we enjoy having them. We enjoy looking after them the best of our the best that we can. There's always going to be disgruntles, and you just got to learn to deal with it. But this is where I'm talking about the lack of training. He was doing a medical transfer. She said he was a foreign driver, as I understand. He was a foreign driver, radical driving, and all this stuff. I heard a conversation on your open line show. I said to you before, about a month or so ago, when I called you, the Liberal government gave Uber medical transfers for Newfoundland and Labrador. Companies that I work with, when we have medical transfers, we had to do a defensive driving course, working with people with disabilities, and first aid. We had to do a written and a road test to qualify for a taxi driver for years. I've been involved in taxiing. I'm going to age myself 42 years. Not full time. I've worked in other industries, but I've always been involved in taxiing since I've been 18 years old. So the thing is that as of April of 2024, the Liberal government, so they could bring Uber in for the Canada Games, which they know they sponsored. And having said that, the taxi drivers here lost a fortune for Canada Games because of Uber, and a lot of jobs were lost. Almost over 200 guys that I know of that are out of work from cars that have been taken off all the taxi stands. The Liberals waived the written test and the road test for whatever reason, I don't know. They're worried about road safety with school buses and everything else like that. And here they are. You can go into motor vehicle registration without a written test or a road test. And they don't even call it a taxi license anymore. They call it a chauffeur's license because of ride sharing. And you can go in, pass in your class 5 and get a class 4 and go drive a taxi if the company hires you, right? As a taxi driver, you do have to get a criminal background check and a vulnerable sector check, which Uber doesn't have to get. And this is where the problem lies. If you had to go do all this training, know how to work with people with disabilities, that includes mentally, dogs, everything. And having said that, on August the 11th, Uber was sent to the airport to pick up a medical transfer for a lady here. Ye covered the story. She had a husky service dog, and she was turned away. And I've contacted on August 15th, I contacted Digital Services to see what the repercussions were. I can't even get an answer back. I'll probably hear from Elvis before I'll hear from them. Right? It's ridiculous what goes on. And it's all about training. City Hall down there, they all voted. Danny Breen and all his councillors, they voted to bring Uber in here. They let all the taxi bylaws go to one side because of Uber. And when they went to the provincial government, they also passed it. So you got 2 municipal and provincial governments here that don't do any training for any new taxi drivers, that don't do any training for any new Uber drivers, and they don't have an Uber inspector. And this is where a lot of the problem lies. Like myself, I've got defensive driving with people with disabilities, first aid, and all those courses. And a lot of the guys do. The newcomers coming in here, they're going into motor vehicle registration, they're getting a driver's license, and they're going to work without any training.
Yeah, which should never be the way. And there should be no double standard here. If you are driving members of the general public, the training for Uber and traditional cab companies should be exactly the same. Like, I don't even know why that's a confusing issue for the government.
Yeah, and I don't know either, Paddy. And like I said, I went from Sarah Studley, who started all this in April 2024 when she was down at Kitty Bitty, her and Fury and them, when they launched it. They launched it with Brad Gushue-Nichols with the intent to promote using Uber for the Canada Games, which worked 100%. I got 2 jobs in 2 weeks in a taxi that involved the Canada Games. Uber were overparked at the university at the village, it was okay for them to park there. As soon as taxis went in there, we were driven out of there by security. You go over to the Aqua Arena, same difference. Wherever there was sports on to go there, you went to the ballpark on Carpathian Road, you were told to move. Uber drivers were allowed to stay there because of the sponsor money that they gave. And like I said, Danny Breen was the one started all this. And all those councillors at City Hall, they voted for it. So they voted to give away a local industry that supports people, that has bricks and mortar buildings here, that has office staff and everything else. And they brought in an American company, including the Liberals. And here they are, like I said, going around now telling everybody, both of them for both elections. They're going around telling everybody, shop local, buy local, spend local. And the taxi industry right now, and I'll let the guys know, we have about 12 to 1,400 drivers full and part-time. There's about 200 since April of 2025 that have been put out of work. There's been about 60 cars taken off the road with all the companies because it's not feasible to operate. So you're talking about food banks and the trickle effect. There's guys that I've worked with that are in Peace River, Alberta working now. I made phone calls out there, got them jobs in the labour industry and everything else. They're gone with their families. And 2 years ago, you had the Liberals out in Alberta trying to convince everybody to come home for work. And now you turn around and you got the Liberals again right now giving away work, and the NL tradespeople are hurting, right? I don't understand what they're doing. But like getting back to the taxi industry, there's no training. You don't have to do a written test. You don't have to do a road test. And you know this guy as well as I do. Andrew Younghusband has a show out, and it's a 4-part documentary. It's probably on Netflix or something, and it's called Don't Drive Here.
Yeah.
Just look up, just look it up, Paddy, and have a look, and you'll see about the way these people drive in other countries, and without the training coming here with stop signs, red lights, school buses, and all this stuff. I don't understand how the government can even talk about road safety and school bus safety when they're the ones giving out the licenses with no written or road test.
Okay, look, very quick one because I do have to go.
Yeah.
Are the trips with passengers in the back recorded on a dash cam?
Not with the company that you were sent the address. Well, I know the lady. She sent you the name of the company. I know all about it. I'm on holidays, and I got 3 phone calls this morning about it and about what happened, right?
Well, she hasn't sent me an email yet, but the company has. And, okay, just one thing. So all the drivers are considered local. They hold a Newfoundland license and a residence, or they're in the process to become one of our and hold a visa. Let's see, I just saw it very quickly while I was trying to listen to you. So they reviewed the dash cam footage of her rides and showed that none of the drivers were harassing or speeding or doing anything that they shouldn't. So apparently, by the way I'm reading this, is that the interaction between the cab driver and the passenger is captured by a dash cam. So if and when there's a complaint being made, there's nothing quite like, let's go to the tape.
Yeah, okay. Well, not all the vehicles that I work with. I don't have a dash cam in my car. So they all, like, and some of them may, and some of them may not. They may have personal cameras, like they buy themselves, but it's not mandatory by the company that I work with that we have dash cams, right, or in-car cams.
Yeah, okay. And also questioning the request to be paid up front when all the rides are pre-booked in the system with the PO number attached and the rate that Merck Place and L pays for their rides. Okay. Anyway, Paul, appreciate the time. I got to get going.
Yeah, no worries, Paddy. You have yourself a good weekend.
You too, pal. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, buddy. Bye.
You're welcome. All right, let's get a break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4 and say good morning to the Liberal candidate running in St. John's Centre, Gemma Hickey. Gemma, you're on the air.
Hey there. How's it going? It's so good to hear your voice. I'm just plugging away here at the doors, and I just wanted to hop on here, Paddy, because, well, I'm not actually campaigning per se. I'm literally looking at this as an extension of the work I do every day. And so I just wanted to let folks know if they wanted to pop by my headquarters. It's opening. It's open, full swing, but it's at 193 the Marchant Road. And on Saturday, 1 p.m., we're having an open house. But I want to talk about how really we're having a food drive to support Bridges to Hope. In this district in particular, where I live, St. John's Centre, and work, there's a lot of food insecurity. And a number of people know me through various advocacy work, in particular for the LGBT community, for survivors of sexual abuse. But my community background is extensive, and I've worked with the Food Security Network. I think it's called Food First now, I believe, developing a poverty reduction plan, doing research on food insecurity, and also I've volunteered on boards like the AIDS Committee in Newfoundland and Labrador, and also the Women's Center to develop supportive housing units like Marguerite's Place and the Tommy Sexton Center. So these are some of the issues that are coming up at the door. And I just wanted to encourage people to come out and meet me and check out my headquarters, because it's basically like a community space, you know. I want to have an office as MHA in the district. I don't want to be removed from people. And I believe that the times demand an MHA on the ground at all times. And, you know, from what I'm hearing from people on the door, having some great conversations, lots of laughs, but hearing their stories, you know, has broken my heart in many ways. And I've equipped my team here with a number of skills. I got a great team. You know, they're trained in campaigning, that sort of thing. But I also have a social worker on my team. I also have someone who used to work in employment. So if people have concerns while government is in caretaker mode, I want them to feel that they can come to us to reach out and express their concerns. But also, if there's some way that we can help them, I'm happy to do that. But Bridges to Hope was an organization that I partnered with Patty, running a youth charity on Cookstown Road called Art Force for, 15 years. And, you know, we did a lot of work together during the pandemic, delivering meals and food and all kinds of important items to people who were, you know, couldn't go outside. And, you know, so I really want to stress how important it is to help and support these community organizations, because St. John Centre in particular is unique in a way, because it has a number of community organizations that can actually, if coordinated properly, and my vision is through an MHA's office, to address the gaps within the district and also streamline resources. So, you know, I'm excited to talk about my vision for this place, but I really want to encourage people to come out on Saturday, have some fun, you know, 1 o'clock, 193 Lamarchand Road. And please bring a non-perishable food item in support of Bridges to Hope.
As we should. I'm trying to recall now who was doing something as a fundraiser for Bridges to Hope. I'm just scratching my head here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anything else while we have you, Gemma?
No, I just wanted to say that people can register online at my website at electgemma.com for the event to let us know if they want to come, because we're having some food and refreshments and things, and so it'll be a good time. So I hope to see people. And, you know, again, we have people here at my headquarters throughout the days during the election, so please feel free to pop by 193 Lamarchand Road this Saturday the 20th, 1 p.m., and any other time as well. So thanks again for your time, Patty. I won't keep you. I got to get back out on the doors now. But always a pleasure to hear your voice, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Good luck.
All right,
bye-bye. Jim Hickey running for the Liberals, St. John Centre. Yeah, we're almost up to the break. Wayne's there to talk about the MOU. Susan has a response to Megan, her concern with the taxi-related call. Let's see, Twitter, we're VOCM Open Line, you know what to do. Email address is openline@vocm.com, and some real doozies coming in via email here this morning, but hey, all good. We're also going to say good morning and have a conversation with some more candidates. Just a quick comment on the campaigns. Is, you know, when I get an email saying, man, there's too many candidates, I'm not disagreeing, but just think about it for a second. We have rules insofar as how frequently anybody can call, and it seems to me I would be doing a disservice to the voter if we didn't allow candidates to speak their mind and maybe dig into some policy, maybe dig into some of their motivations, those types of things. So, yeah, I mean, especially if we're talking about municipal candidates, there's really a distinct difference between running provincially or municipally or federally or municipally. Generally speaking, there's a pretty big machine behind provincial candidates. And there's a pretty big machine, including money and financing, behind provincial and federal candidates. The same can't be said for the municipal candidate. Now, I'm with you. The shoe leather needs to be their key focus, you know, getting out and meeting the voters where they are, knocking on their doors. But also access to the broader audience can be achieved here. So I understand people say, man, there's too many candidates. But there's also reasons why having candidates, especially municipal candidates, access to the show, because it is not, you know, bankrolled like provincial candidates and or federal candidates. Let's take a break. When we get back, Wayne's here to talk the MOU. Welcome back to the show. Let us go. Line number 3. Wayne, you're on the air.
Good day, Patty. How are you doing?
Very well. How about you?
Oh, very good, sir. Patty, I want to have a little chat about the MOU, I guess.
Sure.
Number one, I watched this from the day Premier Fury and his good friend from Quebec, Mr. Legault, made the announcement at the rooms. And it was then that the alarm bells started to jingle in my head, really. Our premier called this a great day for Newfoundland, and we will see prosperity as a result of it. 2 or 3 days after that, Premier Legault announced in Quebec that this was a repeat of the 69 deal. Well, for all Newfoundlanders, I think we can see that both of those claims cannot be right. And so that just raised more concerns, and more the alarm bells started to ring louder again.
Well, based on the 69 contract, I know why people plug that into their opposition to this, but the main problem with 69, I think we can all agree, is that it was a locked-in fixed price, the end. And the world changed dramatically, and the price of a barrel of oil changed dramatically, and all sources of energy changed dramatically. That was the number one concern with that, but that is not a concern with this one. Like, if we say that we're not getting enough, that's one thing, but there is no fixed price here, insofar as price per kilowatt hour. So, anyway, 69 is thrown in there the same reason Muskrat is thrown in there. It's just, to bolster the opposition. That's my takeaway anyway.
Yes, I think, and Premier Legault made that connection in his own jurisdiction for his own political purposes, no doubt. But notwithstanding, it started the alarm bells ringing in my head. And since then, I've listened to Danny Williams' assessment of it. I've listened to Tess Crosby's assessment of it. And as we know, both of these are political figures in the province, and so you have to discount their points a little bit because they're political position. And then came the 9 business leaders who fully supported it. And I would suspect that if you check the contributors list to the Liberal Party, you'll find all 9 of them there. And so their support for the project doesn't give me any comfort at all. And then a couple of days ago, you were talking to Sue Kellen-Dyer. And in my view, Sue gave the most extensive assessment of this project of any of the other contributors. And I agree with her wholeheartedly.
In what regard?
Well, she looked at it from the point of view, a larger point of view, in that it isn't the value of this electricity just its prize in Quebec. It is the business development, the extensive development that will come as a consequence or result of it. And I think in 10 years after that project is delivering power to Hydro-Quebec, you will see a phenomenal change in the province of Quebec in terms of industrial development there. And that development, the business owners behind that development will certainly choose going to Quebec over coming to Newfoundland, even if we do have recall rates on the power. And so I think that will affect the value of the power in the province of Quebec, and it should affect the way we assign value to it when we're selling it, knowing full well that the big prize really is the industrial development that will come as a consequence of having control of that much electrical energy.
Fair enough. That's a big moving target, though, isn't it? Because we talk about the fact, one of the things people say is we shouldn't sign it unless we pay the same for power as they do in Quebec. But we came to the table paying 14.25 cents per kilowatt hour, and the average across the board in Quebec is around 8 cents. And to pick up on your point, I guess it would kind of depend on a multitude of circumstances. So, like, to sell power to the residential customer comes at one cost. To sell power to a data center with using artificial intelligence would be another cost. To sell it to a mine would be another cost. So, are you suggesting that we would have to break down exactly how these additional power, whether, let's use round number, 2,000 megawatts, how it's utilized by the province of Quebec with a moving target and a moving schedule to get what we would call our fair shake? Is that what you mean by that?
To a certain extent, but I would be thinking more of a composite increase rather than just the pure value of the power alone. That we could assign some factor there for the real value that this power is going to provide to the province of Quebec. We shouldn't just sell it at a market value for electrical energy. I think Quebec will benefit tremendously from having this amount of power to offer to industry, and we should gain ourselves a little bit, just a little bit, above normal power rates because of that. Because in all likelihood, industry people will choose to go to Quebec, notwithstanding we have recall power rights there in this province. So yes, I think we should not just look at the pure value of the electrical energy itself, and we should assign some factor, I don't know what factor, but some factor in addition to that to what the selling price would be. So here's where I am on this. I want to get a report from an independent group of experts, not from a bunch of politicians. And whether it goes after that, the government should be obligated to ensure that the people of this province are educated and can make an educated decision in support or no support for the project. This is our last chance, I would say, notwithstanding the critical minerals that they're talking about in Labrador. But this is our one last chance in a long, long time to make some great contribution to our children and grandchildren and their children. And if we muck this up, and I believe we're going to muck it up if we continue on the route that we're on right now, leaving this in the hands of a bunch of politicians in there, and very few of which have any kind of education or experience to make a proper valued assessment of this project.
Fair enough. I appreciate the call, Wayne. Anything else before we say goodbye?
No, that's about it, Paddy. But I will say this, that I will not be voting for any Liberal representative in this area unless the Premier changes course on this and puts on his big boy pants and throws away his politician pants and put this on before the people, having done a proper assessment by an independent group of experts. That's it.
Appreciate the time. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks for your time, Paddy.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, another one before we go to the news. Fine. Line number 5. Susan, you're on the air. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. All right. I guess, insofar as what all of the parties are saying about the MOU, of course, not me putting words in the Premier's mouth, but he's pretty much put this front and centre. It is the issue for the Liberals, for Premier Hogan, regarding the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding and the election coming up on the 14th, even though advanced polls will be open sooner than later. As far as I can tell, in having conversations with Jim Dinn and Tony Wakeham, as opposed to really specific concerns therein, it's more about this concept of independent review, which I get. And the technical issue pointed to by whether it be the Premier or Jennifer Williams or otherwise, why the LeBlanc recommendation of a independent review or analysis of any capital project in excess of $50 million, it's not really passing the smell test with a lot of people. But again, people coming at me about saying, boy, you're trying to push the deal. Oh yeah, I'm trying to push the deal by having all of the opposition voices on more often than anybody else. Got it. I do think it's an important question, is what are we asking someone to evaluate? I don't know how that's an unfair question. Because just imagine, think about the conversation between whoever, Jennifer Williams or Carl Smith or John Hogan or whoever else, in speaking with the senior leadership of, just pick a company to come in and do the assessment, who wouldn't have any conflicts. Can you have a look at this and see if we're getting the best deal? That's not even a question anybody can actually answer, is it? If they weren't involved in negotiations. So we'd have to ask some specific stuff. Are we on the right track with price elasticity? What should we be considering regarding risk? Whatever it is. But we'd have to ask them something in particular, right? Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, tons of show left for you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 6. Susan, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Happy Friday.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Yes, listen, I'm calling, and it's not necessarily specific to the lady that called in earlier about the cab, but I think it's kind of the message behind that. Like, you know, our knee-jerk reaction cannot be, you know, if only I had someone local or if only they spoke English, then I wouldn't have ran into this problem. I really think that's unfair. We as Newfoundlanders are better than that, and we have to strive to continue to be better than that. Like, you know, you can run into issues or problems, whether it's someone's driving or someone is being inappropriate or harassing you, regardless of the color of their skin or their religion or the language that they speak. This is not who we are as Newfoundlanders to say, well, if only it had been Bill that drives the cab and lives in Torbay his whole life, then I wouldn't have had a problem. That's really, really unfair. We have so many people that are choosing Newfoundland and Labrador to raise their families, to contribute to our communities, to start up their own businesses, to give back to their communities. And our knee-jerk reaction cannot be, well, if it was someone local, then it would have been easier for me. Like, we cannot go there just at the slightest inconvenience. Maybe we have to put in a little bit extra effort to be able to communicate with those individuals who English is their second language. I only have one language. So imagine these people, English is their second language. They can say that. We need to give that some respect. But at the first inconvenience in our communication or our interaction with them, we cannot throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, God, you know, like that. We've got to be better than that. These are the small little pockets and nuggets where, you know, we breed hate and resentment. We are better than that. We are better than that. Like, you know, we have people that maybe someone has had a stroke, you know, and they have aphasia, and so they have difficulty communicating. Maybe someone is deaf. Like, there are some individuals in our communities who are giving, you know, service, are providing a service, are doing a job, and at the slightest inconvenience or, you know, upset, we're saying, well, if it was someone local, I wouldn't have had that problem. This is about processes and policy, whatever it is, with motor vehicle or whatever. I don't know. I mean, that's not my wheelhouse, but I think that's what it comes down to. It's about processes and policy. It's not about people. We cannot make this about the individuals and where they come from and what language they speak. That's really not fair. We are better than that.
I can't speak to anybody's individual experience or interaction with anybody if I wasn't there, so I don't know. Like, for instance, my number one concern necessarily when we talk about the local cab companies is so many of the cabs are just uncomfortable and dirty, right? I mean, that's basically my only concern with some of the cabs that I've been in. And if someone is working for a cab company, they should undergo not only the required training, and there should be a code of conduct that's standard across the industry, because then if we have those base starting points, then we can, you know, maybe separate the dislike or distrust of a newcomer versus a local behind the wheel of a cab. And like I said to the caller, when I get in a cab, I just want to tell you where I need to go, and then I get there, I pay you, I thank you, and I get out. That's it.
Yes. And the thing is, though, Patty, like, you know, I work from home. I've always got Open Line on in the background. I'll go down and make a coffee, and it's not necessarily just about this cab call today.
Nope. It's,
you know, I hear it way too frequently, and it hurts my heart, to be honest, as a Newfoundlander. And as a Newfoundlander, like, you know, we can do better. We have to do better. We have to be less intolerant. It's almost like you're inconveniencing me. You don't understand, what I'm saying. If you go visit Dominican, you're not inconvenienced if you got to go up to the swim-up bar and they don't necessarily know what you're asking for, right? Because you're in happy holiday mode. Well, we have to be in that mode of, sort of accepting where we're at and the people that are contributing to our workforce. But too many times I hear people calling in to your line, whether it's about a cab or a store or some kind of service that they received or whatever. And it's just not fair. It's just not fair. That is, if someone harassed you or someone gave you, less than appropriate service, then that's about that individual or maybe that company. Maybe, they need to do more screening. Instead of pigeonholing it and saying, well, if we didn't let so many of these folk in, I don't know. It just hurts my heart when I hear it. I think we're better than that. Like we brag so greatly about, Gander and 9/11 and how welcoming we were. Well, some people that are calling in, it's like, well, I'm certainly glad you weren't on the ground when those people were coming in, because you would have been separating them by, well, I can't really communicate with you, so you're going to go over there. I mean, it's just beyond ridiculous. Like, let's do better and be better, right? It's just not, it's not okay. If you have a problem with a policy or a process and you think it needs to be tighter or you think it needs to be leaner or you think it needs to be more stringent, whatever it is, whether it's about, aircrafts or cabs or, your butcher, then don't make it about the person. It's not about them, right? It's not about the person, and you can't at the same time kind of segregate. Well, all new cab drivers are this, that, or the other thing. It's just not fair. It's just really upsetting me. This is the first time I've ever called in to Open Line about anything besides the work that I do. But this it hurts my heart, and we need to pick up our game and stop being snobs is what I'd say. Or back in the day in Mount Pearl, we'd say, don't be a tool. And so I would just stop being a tool, be more patient with people.
For me, the entire conversation about immigration is more often than not conducted in bad faith. And this is not about one call or another. And here's what I mean by that. I think it's fair to say that, we have to do everything possible to ensure the proper vetting of newcomers for a variety of reasons. I think it's fair to say that the population grew so quick we weren't prepared insofar as housing or access to healthcare goes. I think that's fair to say. But the unfortunate reality on the ground is people don't voice those concerns necessarily strictly about government policy and or political parties. It ends up manifesting itself in resentment and maltreatment of the newcomer.
Right.
I mean,
you're right.
That's how it goes. And plus, the way we evaluate who's someone who's an immigrant or someone new to the country, and I don't think this is unfair, and people can be as mad at me as they like. You go to the store, you're lined up to pay for your groceries or whatever the case may be. The person right in front of me is brown-skinned. The person in front of them is a white person, and we automatically think the brown-skinned person is the newcomer or the immigrant, when they could be third-generation Canadian, and the white guy in front of them might have been just off the boat from Ireland. So we really just have to have I think a little bit more of a rational, mature conversation about immigration. If you think the government policies are flawed, and I think for the most part they were. They absolutely were, but that doesn't really translate to conversations or interactions on the ground in the community.
Exactly. Do I agree that we do? We could tighten up some of our policies and our processes and our procedures and all that. Absolutely, there's always room for that. That's why we have elections, right? So we can talk about those things. But for God's sake, don't make it about the people who are choosing Newfoundland and Labrador to be their home, where they're going to raise their kids, where they're going to start their own businesses, where they're going to contribute to our communities. Do not make it about them. It is not about them. If your cab driver or someone doing your nails or the guy at the McDonald's drive-thru is being a tool, then that's about him being a tool. That is not about our immigration policy. That is human to human. We just can't get offended at the slightest inconvenience, right? It's not who we are.
If a newcomer to the country is unable to not act like, for instance, if you commit a serious crime, then there's a conversation to be had there. But presuming that everybody is not going to be able to, one, assimilate or one, learn the language or whatever the case may be, then the conversations get derailed pretty quickly. Susan, I'm glad you made time for the show. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Patty. I also wanted to just say one more thing. The guy that's driving your cab or handing the McDonald's, your McDonald's order out the window to you, he may be a brain surgeon. He or she may be a brain surgeon back in their own country, but there's a lot of policy and paperwork and processes around them being, licensed in Newfoundland and Labrador. So you got to be careful who you're, giving the stink eye to, because he could be your orthopedic surgeon next. Just be kind.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate your time.
All right, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break in. Who's next? Don't know. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line 7 and say good morning to Rigel Penman, running for Deputy Mayor here in the city of St. John's. Good morning, Rigel. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty. Thanks very much for having me.
Happy to do it. Where would you like to start?
Thanks for introducing me. If you want to start, I'm happy to jump right into some of the issues in the platform. I know we don't have a lot of time and don't want to waste anybody's time listening. I've been living in St. John's for a couple of years now, and I found that what motivated me to run was when I was talking to my friends and my coworkers. We saw a lot of the same issues that were affecting the city, and we had a lot of the same ideas about how to fix them. And so, really excited to bring those ideas forward and try to make them into policy. And one of the issues we saw right away was sort of the layout of the city generally, and how outdated regulations are affecting the capacity for the city to change and grow and make new developments. One of the biggest issues the city is facing right now is housing, and something we found really consistently is that there's a lot of regulations that prevent new housing developments from going up that are going to serve the city's needs that were made a long time ago and have simply not caught up with changes in technology and building materials and techniques. And so we're kind of holding back progress for the sake of something that used to be in place for the sake of safety, but now when you look at our city as compared to other cities that don't have these types of regulations, our city is not coming out any safer, but we are falling behind on housing developments. So one of the classic examples I like to point to is rules that require apartment buildings of 2 to 3 stories to have multiple staircases in each one, because while it sounds like a really boring technical thing, interior staircases take up a huge amount of space. And so what that has resulted in a lot of instances is usually in order to get more dense housing in an area in the city where you want it, for a new developer to be able to take that project on, they're going to have to buy up multiple current existing lots, knock everything that's there currently down, then file a bunch of paperwork with the city to have those lots all conglomerated into one, and then they have to put up one big, gigantic apartment structure that is going to, fit these requirements. But because of that, that project is so expensive and requires so much overhead and so many lawyers to see you through the regulatory process that those project bids are really only functionally accessible to a relatively small number of really big construction companies. And so what you see is a lot of the projects that are available and the funding that goes to support them gets snapped up by these big national or international companies, where the profits that they generate are frequently, being shipped out of the city back to corporate headquarters in Toronto or Delaware instead of staying in the local economy. And so one of the things I'd like to do is start to change those types of regulations to allow for new housing developments to be taken on by smaller locally owned construction companies, so that we can both get a more diverse spread of types of housing, including single family and multi-unit housing, as well as get that housing being owned by a more diverse spread of people. Because what that does right out of the gate is I think it has multiple positive effects for the economy, partially in the fact that you've immediately got those smaller locally owned companies. Now they're able to succeed. There's projects that are accessible to them and they can start growing a lot faster. faster, and they aren't going to just wait to get bought out by a big international company. And then it also creates a more diverse spread of ownership of the housing market, and that is one of the most effective controls on rent and housing prices you can get, because when you know, like any other monopoly, when too much of the housing market is owned by a small number of people, they realize they don't really have to compete with each other in the same way. They can just kind of keep, you know, ratcheting prices up and raking in the money. Whereas when you do have more authentic competition, especially when it is by more locally owned people with, you know, more investment in the community, I think you start to see a lot more competition driving rent prices, driving housing prices down, and sort of forming more of a functional flowing economy where St. John's citizens have a realistic chance of finding affordable housing and of getting into the home ownership market themselves. And I think there's a lot of other room for improvement like that, where we can take tools that the city has at its disposal immediately available and start applying them without engaging in a lot of extra spending to encourage new projects and to, you know, make citizens' lives better. Like another area I like to talk about is public transit, because everybody seems to talk about, you know, like Metro bus options and not having great coverage. And so while I think on the one hand, you know, the Metro bus, we do need to invest more in it. We just don't have enough buses. We don't have enough capacity to serve the city's current needs, and so buses cost money, and that part does require investment. There's also a lot of other steps we can take that are going to allow for improvements in service without spending up front. Like one of the biggest ones is just increasing the extent to which we want to cooperate with neighboring communities like CBS and Paradise and Mount Pearl and integrate our existing services to allow citizens to flow more freely between the communities and allow all the resources in there to be accessible to everyone. And that's another thing that I think is important with, you know, considering housing is also zoning of the city to make our communities more livable and accessible and, you know, walkable. So one thing I would like to see is amongst that effort to reconsider what kind of housing developments, we should also be reconsidering our commercial developments and where they're placed. Like, it doesn't make sense to have the whole city need to go into a few major commercial centers like downtown or Village Mall or Avalon Mall for all of their needs, and then to, you know, create this huge traffic congestions and parking issues down there, whereas we could alleviate a lot of that need by having more businesses like locally, like small grocery stores, locally owned cafes distributed throughout communities so that people don't need to go into major centers nearly as often. And then that again also contributes into that, you know, virtuous and positive cycle of having more local ownership, resulting in more money staying in that economy. Because, you know, like I say, when you've got a lot of the local housing market or commercial space being owned by, you know, large companies that are headquartered somewhere else, and their, you know, corporate structure and their responsibility or their shareholders dictates that they're going to be taking the money that they generate from operating here and shipping it outside the city, you know, our city is always going to suffer for losing that revenue to some extent at least. And we need to be aware that while, sure, those types of developments might create jobs and do some good things, we can create those jobs by encouraging more locally owned businesses where that money stays here and it gets paid into the local tax base. It goes to fund local services. And also, you know, they hire more local people. And I know in my own personal experience, I find working for, you know, big companies that are headquartered elsewhere, you do kind of become a cog in a machine, whereas working for small businesses where it's a, you know, more cohesive small team that actually knows each other, those tend to be better jobs, right? The employees tend to be better taken care of, and it tends to, you know, make it a more desirable city to live in if you have the opportunity to work in those businesses. And so, yeah, a big part of my platform and what I want to do in running for deputy mayor is to try and encourage those policy changes to make our city more livable, more accessible, and to make it more of a place that's going to encourage the growth of small and locally owned businesses and is going to give more citizens a chance to get into home ownership business, starting businesses and starting their own lives here in St. John's, instead of, you know, sort of taking it for granted that they might have to travel abroad to make their living and then come back. Yeah. So that's sort of my main platform.
Fair enough. On housing and affordability and first-time home buyers and stuff, there's plenty of, you know, I do find it curious that there's federal pots of money to support first-time home buyers when we have a demand-side issue. Right? So now we're ginning it up by supporting first-time homeowners. And inside the envelope of housing, very quickly before I get to the news, we also need to have a distinction about what housing means. So affordable housing is not just one thing. The whole traditional single detached home is not necessarily the way of the future. So it's multiplexes and building up versus out, public housing specifically for seniors. So there's a lot to housing that really deserves a break it down, small, bite-sized morsels, so that we actually build what we really need, not what we think we need. Because what we think we need is probably a mindset of 40 years ago. Things are changing.
Exactly.
Tiny homes, modular homes, single detached homes, fourplexes, apartment buildings, build up, not out, seniors, affordable. So housing is not just one thing, it's many things. Final thoughts very quickly before I have to go.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything you just said, and I think part of serving that is if we can get more small locally owned construction companies and people getting into the development market, then that allows St. John's to discover the most valuable ways for its citizens to serve each other, right? Like when you say housing is a complex issue, nobody knows that better than the people of St. John's, and so I think giving the citizens more empowerment to address that problem and to have a louder voice in what type of housing grows in the city is one of the best steps we can take towards both addressing the issue and to making sure that we're addressing it in a way that serves our needs and the needs going forward into the future, not, like you say, trying to address needs from 40 years ago.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Good luck out there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on. Cheers.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. This is Rigel Penman, running for Deputy Mayor. When we come back, MOU, Airbnb, Uber, public transportation, water, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4 and say good morning to Danny Breen, seeking re-election for the Mayor of the City of St. John's. Good morning, Danny. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. Good morning. How are you?
That's kind. How about yourself?
Doing great. Thank you.
Let's dig in with a couple of comments made about you and some decisions that you've made in the recent past. Let's start with Uber. Sure. The traditional cab companies are pushing back, and then we have that double standard of the type of background checks that the cab companies have to get versus Uber. So Uber's kind of throwing a monkey wrench into the local taxi business. Your thoughts?
Well, when Uber first expressed an interest to come here, and when people who were frustrated with the lack of taxi service downtown at that time, when that all came about, we Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador and St. John's Board of Trade and other groups approached us, and we went to the province and said, look, we don't really have the legislation to do this. We can take care of taxis, but ride sharing is silent in our antiquated legislation. So after some discussions, we also pointed out that if right now we only take care of taxis in St. John's, and when you have ride sharing, that those taxis, like the city's taxis, could be going out to CBS or Paradise or Mount Pearl. So this would be better to be done on a regional basis. So the province then wrote the legislation and the regulations for ride-sharing programs like Uber. So the province has responsibility. They're the ones that drew up the legislation. They're responsible for ride-sharing in the province as a whole.
I think it's fair to say, spurred on by the city approaching the province to allow the legislation to be crafted. And I know this isn't your authority, but do you think that the Uber and all rideshare drivers should also have a criminal background check and a vulnerable sector check, as opposed to be up to them whether or not they get the vulnerable sector check?
Absolutely, and we were pushing for that for the taxi drivers, and they did that, and they should do it for the ride-sharing programs. The other thing, our concern was that the insurance is treated differently, and whatever they do for insurance for ride-sharing should be done for the taxi industry as well.
Fair enough. We'll bounce around a couple here. Airbnb. So people are talking about, I heard one caller this week say we should do away with Airbnb, as opposed to, I don't want the city telling me that I can't have or operate my Airbnb if it's already been approved. But it has had an impact on rent and access to rent. I mean, vacancy rate, around 1% here in the city of St. John's. Is it time to put a cap on any future approvals of short-term rentals?
So we don't approve short-term rentals. So when you build a house and your house, if you decide to lease that or rent it by the month, the day, or the year, it's a rental. It's not something that we get involved in. Airbnb and short-term accommodations are regulated by the province, who put the legislation in place. We wanted the legislation put in place to regulate it. One of the reasons for it was that we could collect the 4% accommodation tax. on that. We still don't have that in place. There's still some regulations that need to be changed by the province, but the province is regulating Airbnbs now. But we don't, when there's a house approved, whether it's rented or whether it's owner-occupied, is not part of our regulations.
I guess what I'm getting at, and maybe I should be a bit more careful, is if the city was able to approach the province for legislation to enable rideshare, then the city can approach the province to implement some sort of control over Airbnb or short-term rentals, because we do indeed have an access to rental property problem, long-term rental.
Yeah, so that would be a very difficult thing, I think, for the city to do, because we'd be telling somebody, like, you can rent your property, but you can't rent it on a short-term basis, because we still need rentals in the market. So you're talking about the duration. The other part of that is some people get out of the rental business because of the problems that they've had with renting their properties. And so that goes back to the Landlord-Tenant Relations Act, and that's another piece of legislation that I think would figure into this.
Quick mention, this just popped in my head, on water tax. We know it's gone up across the board for commercial entities, I think 2.2% and $15 per unit for the rest of us. But if I may, water meters seem to me a bit more of a fair approach to it. If I'm a single living by myself and I pay the same fee as someone living next door with a family of 5, and the consumption of water they experience versus water I experience, is there any thought water meters to make it more fair as part of the conversation?
That discussion it comes up every now and then. One of the problems that we'd have now is retrofitting all the residences with water meters. And at the end of the day, you do have to cover the basic operating costs of the water treatment. So that water treatment is really has a very defined base cost, no matter how much water you're producing. So the question is, do you have enough volume in the water to be able to make a difference to a bill if you did it based on usage? But there is an argument about somebody, has a family of 4 or 4 or 6 people living in the house versus one person living in a house, and that consumption. So that's something that comes up, I think a couple of times since I've been on council in my tenure. And I think it's something that gets spoken about regularly, but there's a fair bit of analysis that would have to be done in order to arrive at if that's a good move to make into the future. Last one on housing, once again, because it's a massive concern here in the city, is we know there's access to federal funding and some other supports out there, but the gatekeeper of approvals and timelines and inspections and whatnot is strictly the authority of the municipality, in this case the City of St. John's. I mean, an opportunity for something like create a list of verified, reputable contractors and, not just throwing caution to the wind, but a way to fast track the building of houses, because some people just simply don't want to go through all the hoops and all the hurdles to try to develop inside the City of St. John's. So tell developers right to my face all the time. So is there a better way to handle the housing business? Well, there is some improvements that we're making. In April or May of this year, 26, the city will be introducing electronic permitting. So that will speed up the permitting process. The big thing is that, you have to adhere to the National Building Code. You have to adhere to the National Fire Safety Code. And they're the issues that are being, that you want to make sure you have developments, but that you have good developments that are sustainable in the long term and are safe. So that's that fine line that you get in between, as they say, red tape versus responsible review of applications. So it's something that we're working on. We've changed development regulations to speed up the processes and take to move it forward. But I think the electronic permitting system will improve that greatly. One more topic of your choosing before we have to go, Danny. Yeah, so I think public safety is the big issue, and we've done our citizen satisfaction surveys over the past couple of years, and public safety has always is growing to at the top of the list right now. I just want to point out that, the city, although we don't have responsibility for policing, responsibility for healthcare, we're very involved in the collaboration of all those groups. And just give you an idea, when it comes to public safety, it's not just the drug crisis that we're in. It's also the issues around the legal system, the number of police officers, and those sorts of things. So I sit on Big City Mayor's Caucus, and one of the things that we're lobbying on is bail reform for repeat offenders. We're also working on the court system, how we're able to make the court system more effective, and again, locally, we're working on getting more police officers on the streets. And when you look at the special constable program that was just brought out, it's something that we've been talking about with the RNC and with the government for a while. So I think we work collaboratively with everybody on the public safety issues, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to make a difference on this. No one politician, no one level of government has all the answers. It's everybody has to be at the table working on it.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, Danny. Good luck.
Okay, thank you, Paddy.
Bye-bye. Danny Breen running for re-election as mayor. Final break of the morning and the week. When we go back, another candidate for councillor at large. And I thought there was an MOU in the queue, but we'll see when we come back. Don't go away. We'll go back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Say good morning, John Barber, running for councillor at large here in town. John, you're on the air.
Hi. Good morning, Paddy. How's it going?
Great today. How about you?
Oh, fine. So I'm calling today to talk about housing in the city of St. John's.
Let's do it.
Okay, so housing, I think, is the number one issue facing the city of St. John's right now. We're down 1,000 homes right now, and we're expected to be down 2,700 homes by 2028. As a city, at the city level, I think what we can do about that is to improve density, use existing spaces, and try to improve, work with developers, and maybe adjust some zoning regulations to bring development into these vacant properties, especially in the downtown core.
Specifically how? Let's stick with downtown. Specifically, what about the downtown?
Okay, so there's currently an area called Commercial Downtown Mixed. I think we could work with the city to amend that to allow more residential units in those buildings, or allow residential developments. Currently, it would be commercial only, but they are sitting empty. These are vacant spaces that I would like to see developed or used, and not just to sit vacant.
Yeah, me too. Like, I don't understand why there isn't more mixed zoning. I mean, we do it all the time, industrial, commercial, for things like housing when we need housing, and there's places that are left vacant, and we won't let people create an apartment. I just don't understand what the rationale is behind it, to be honest.
Well, I know there's certain regulations about frontage, fire safety and whatnot, and those are important issues, and we need to be able to work with that. But if it's been sitting vacant, and we're getting tax credits for these vacant properties, I think there should be more incentive to bring more units into these buildings. We're in a desperate need for units.
Absolutely. So, is that strictly a zoning issue?
Downtown, I believe, for commercial downtown mix, that is a zoning issue. That those properties are not zoned for residential use. I'm not sure of every issue facing the city with commercial downtown mix, but that is one of the things I would like to address as city councillor. It's
a double-edged sword too, right? I mean, that's poor choice of words. There's a double upside here. It creates more units, and plus, if we're talking about vibrancy downtown and foot traffic, what have you, nothing like quite having people live downtown to provide said vibrancy and foot traffic.
That's correct. And another thing we could use downtown would be a grocery store, but getting that into the area is a tough thing to do. There's only so much space down there.
Yeah, I think they refer to the Stadium Dominion as the closest thing to a downtown grocery store. And, well, I guess there's a Sobeys on Merry Meeting Road as well. There's a Coleman's down the street. I don't know where the space would be necessarily for a grocery store downtown, but I get the point.
Exactly. The other thing I'd really like to see was that what happened at 222 Merchant Road. That's a property in my neighborhood. Recently, the city was able to work with developers on that property and add 100 additional units. So I'd like to see that continue to happen, and I'm going to work every day as a city councillor to make that happen.
Yeah, good for you. Have you ever taken a swing at this in the past, John?
No, this is my first time running. Ready?
Good man. And what was the motivation that put you over the edge to put your name on the ballot?
My motivation is I live in I live in this city. I think it's the greatest city in the world. I want it to be a great city to live in for future generations as well. So in order to do that, you got to stand up and do the work. And I was willing to stand up and do the work, and it was the right timing for in terms of family and what have you. And you just have to go. when you give them that opportunity, it has to happen.
Well, good man. I'm really pleased to know that the turnout for candidates in a lot of communities, and certainly here in the city of St. John's, is especially strong these days. And I think that's good for all of us. John, anything else you'd like to broach while we have you this morning?
Well, given this provincial election is on the go, I would like to have the people of this province ask their provincial candidates if we can afford to overspend on a dam by $7 billion, why do we have unroofed individuals at all? If we can afford to, overspend on a dam by $7 billion, why is this an issue? There's 300 active homeless people in St. John's right now, or over 300 active homeless people. I think $7 billion could put them in homes.
Yes.
We need to invest in local development.
Yeah, we could all be living in penthouses for that. John, I appreciate your time this morning, and I wish you good luck out there.
Thank you very much for your time, Paddy.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
John Barber, running for at-large council position in town. Line 2. Wayne, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Paddy, I just wanted to take a moment of your time. This coming Sunday, we have our annual Toys for Tots ride in aid of the Salvation Army Christmas drive for Toys for Kids. And I wanted to get a message out there to the public that on Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m., we'll be at the Canadian Tire parking lot on Kelsey Drive. And we'd like the public to drop by and drop off some toys to help put a smile on some child's face this Christmas. Also, they'll be there with their kettle, so if you don't have time to go shopping to pick up some toys, you can drop by and drop off a monetary donation as well. We're hoping Santa's going to be there. I've heard from him, and he said he's going to try to get there. He's also a motorcycle rider, and he's going to try to get by on his bike if he can. But yeah, it's going to be great. Canadian Tire, Kelsey Drive this Sunday from 1 to 2.
Yeah, everybody knows Santa rides a hog. I mean, what are we talking about?
Oh, no, he don't ride a hog, Paddy. He rides a motorcycle.
You know what I meant. Okay, so that's great. Anything in particular in the world of toys that you're looking for? Because, there's so many different age groups. Teens want one thing, little kids want another. So are there any special requests based on some of the gifts you've been getting in the years past?
Paddy, we've been receiving all kinds of gifts. I mean, everything from stuffed toys to games to, dolls and different things like that, trucks and what have you for smaller kids. But you also got to remember the older kids, and we all have teenagers out there as well. So even gift cards, things like that they can give them during Christmas, and they can go pick up something that they need.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Good to have you on the show. Good luck with the event, Wayne. Thanks for making time for the show.
All right, I appreciate it, Paddy, and thank you very much for helping us get the message out.
Happy to do it. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right. It's been a week. No doubt about that. Just a couple of things that I said I would do on behalf of some callers who didn't get on today. Coming up on Monday morning, Bill Kavanagh, the CUPE representative over at Memorial University, they're hosting a Leaders Election Town Hall on post-secondary education this coming Wednesday, the 24th, 6:30 p.m. Arrival for a 7 p.m. start, at the Bruno Centre. So we'll look forward to that. We don't have enough conversation about education, nor am I hearing a whole lot of it from the leaders, other than, picking up on the 15 fictional citations in the Education Accord, which is important, but there's more to be discussed on that front. Plus, for the folks out in Grand Falls, Windsor, who are interested in taking the opportunity to vote in the advance polls, tomorrow from 8 to 8 at the Windsor Pentecostal Church is your opportunity to do that. All right, let's see here. Last check in on the Twitter box for the week. We're VOCM Open Line, you know what to do. Email address openline@vocm.com. And someone sent along this quote. And, we're talking about the way people are taxed at different earning brackets and what have you, and just how it's getting away from us, where we're actually on a path to see an individual be a trillionaire in this world. I thought this quote was apropos. If a monkey hoarded more bananas than it could eat, while most of the other monkeys starved, scientists would study that monkey to figure out what the heck is wrong with it. When humans do it, we put them on the cover of Forbes. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands, all the callers, listeners, emailers and tweeters. You are all right. We will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy weekend. Talk Monday. Bye-bye.